The final click felt good, solid. The confirmation message glowed on the screen. Your transfer of 1,250 US dollars to Maria Reyes has been successfully processed. For a moment, a wave of satisfaction washed over me, the familiar pride of a man handling his business. It was a kingly feeling. I pictured the money arriving, a digital lifeline stretching from my quiet apartment in Ohio to their small, sun drenched house in the Philippines. That was rent covered. Leo's school fees paid up, groceries for the month, plus a little extra for a treat, a haircut for him, maybe a new dress for her. I was the good guy, the one who had stepped up. When Maria told me about Leo's father, a ghost in their lives, a man who offered whispered promises but never material support, it felt like a calling. Here was a ready made family, a beautiful woman and a bright eyed little boy, needing only a steady hand. My hand. I was building something, I told myself, laying a foundation brick by expensive brick. It wasn't just about the money, it was about presence, even from 8,000 miles away. It was about showing them what a real man does. Leaning back in my chair, I waited for the inevitable video call. The laptop I was staring at was a twin to the one I'd bought her. "For your online courses," I'd said, "and so we can talk more." The screen shimmered to life. Her face, framed by the dark hair I loved, filled the display. "Hi, babe," she said, her voice a warm melody that always seemed to melt the distance between us. "It came through. Thank you so much." "Of course," I smiled, the king feeling a fresh surge of validation. "How's my little guy?" She turned the laptop, and there was Leo, sitting on the floor, deeply engrossed with a new-looking robot, all gleaming plastic and flashing LEDs. He looked up and gave me a shy wave. "Hey, champ, is that the one I sent for your birthday?" I asked, trying to place it. I'd sent a box of Lego, a big Star Wars set he'd been begging for. Maria answered before he could, her tone casual, almost an afterthought. "Oh no, the Lego is still in the box. He wants to build it with his cousins. This one is from his papa. He sent a small package the other day." The word landed like a stone in a quiet pond. Papa. Not his father, not his biological dad. Papa. A title, an office. The casualness of it was a quiet shock. I thought my nightly calls, my constant support, the very laptop she was using, were slowly writing that man out of the script. Instead, he was still getting his lines. I forced a smile. "Oh, that's nice of him." "He tries," she said, and there was no malice in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. That was worse. It wasn't the competition she was judging. I was the only one who even knew there was a contest. Leo, emboldened, picked up the robot and ran to the camera. "Look, his name is Voltron. Papa said he will bring me a bigger one when he visits." My throat tightened. "When he visits?" I kept my voice even, a marvel of practiced control. Maria gently pulled Leo back from the camera. "He's just talking, babe. You know how kids are. Go play now, Leo." She turned back to me, her expression softening into the familiar, loving gaze that always made me feel like her one and only. "Don't mind him. He misses his friends. Now, tell me about your week. Did you get the pictures I sent from the party?" She meant the photos from Leo's local birthday celebration, the one with his grandparents and cousins, the one I'd paid for but wasn't invited to. I stared at her, smiling at me through the screen, the image transmitted perfectly by the device I'd provided. In the background, Leo was making his new robot fight an imaginary monster, and for the first time, I felt the cold, hard certainty that I hadn't built a home. I had just been paying the rent on a house someone else still owned. The unease from that conversation clung to me for days. I tried to shake it. "It's complicated," I reasoned. "Of course, Leo would still have some attachment to the man. Biology is a stubborn fact. But I was the one on the ground, metaphorically speaking. I was the one making sure the lights stayed on. that had to count for more than a cheap plastic robot and an empty promise. I pinned a picture of Maria and me from a trip to a local park she'd taken with my photo on her phone screen to my desktop background. It was a clumsy digital approximation of a family portrait, but it was my proof of concept. Our call started to feel different, shorter. The connection would suddenly get choppy, her image freezing on a strained smile before she'd hang up and send a text. Sorry, babe, internet is so bad today. One evening, I was telling her about a promotion I was working towards, a move that would make sending money even easier, and I heard a man's voice call out in the background, not in English. Maria's eyes darted off screen. Who's that? I asked, keeping my tone light. Just my cousin, he's fixing the sink, she said, a little too quickly. She turned the laptop to show me the empty doorway of her kitchen. See, all clear. She gave me a playful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. The explanation was plausible, even logical, but her immediate need to prove it felt strange. It felt like a performance. A week later, flush with a small bonus, I brought up the future. I was thinking, I started, my heart doing a little jump. Maybe it's time we started the visa paperwork for you and Leo. We could look at getting you here before the end of the year. There was a beat of silence. It wasn't the excited gasp I'd fantasized about. Oh, babe, here? Her voice was thin. But my whole family is here. My mom needs me. And Leo's school. He's doing so well. Maybe it's better if you just come visit first. We could get a nice hotel. It would be a wonderful vacation. She pivoted so smoothly it was dizzying. Actually, that reminds me. The school is asking for a new building fund contribution. It's mandatory. The whiplash was severe. I felt my fantasy of a shared future get swapped out for another invoice. A vacation, a hotel, not a home. I was a tourist in the life I was supposedly building. The emotional disconnect was a chasm I could suddenly see right to the bottom of. The real crack appeared on a Tuesday night. I was aimlessly scrolling through Facebook, a digital voyeurism I developed a taste for. I wasn't on her friends list. She said she kept it just for family for privacy, but her cousin's profile was public. I clicked through photos from a recent family beach day. There were dozens of pictures. Leo splashing in the surf, Maria laughing with her sisters, a big group gathered around a grill. In one photo, a man had Leo perched on his shoulders. His back was mostly to the camera, but I could see his arm around Maria's waist, his hand resting casually on her hip. It was an easy, familiar touch. Under the photo, an aunt had commented in Tagalog. I hit see translation. It read, "Finally, a proper family picture. So happy for you three." I stared at the screen, the pixels swimming. 3, not 2. It wasn't proof, not exactly, but it was a flag, blood red and snapping in a wind I hadn't even known was blowing. My next transfer was scheduled to go out in the morning. I pictured the money leaving my account, flying across the world to pay for family beach days I wasn't a part of. The kingly feeling was a distant memory now, replaced by the cold, creeping suspicion of a fool. I looked at her last message, still sitting on my phone. "Can't talk tonight, babe. Helping Leo with a big school project. I love you. Send my love to your family too." I hadn't spoken to my family in weeks. She knew that. The message felt automated, a template, and I was beginning to understand that I was just another project she was managing. The blinking cursor on the confirm transfer button was a tiny rhythmic heartbeat. I had the page open all night. I'd rehearsed a dozen different opening lines, from furious accusations to wounded questions. But when I finally made the call, my voice was flat, devoid of any emotion at all. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep and a faint edge of irritation. "Babe, it's the middle of the night. What's wrong? Is the transfer not working?" There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" but, "Is the money okay?" "I was on Facebook," I said, my tone as sterile as a banking transaction. Your cousin's page, the beach day photos. The silence on the other end was different this time. It wasn't the lag of a bad connection. It was heavy, solid. There's a picture, I continued, of you, Leo, and a man. His hand is on your waist. An aunt commented, a proper family picture. I didn't ask a question. I stated a fact. I watched the numbers on my transfer screen. $1,250 US dollars. Her sigh was not one of sorrow, but of exhaustion. The kind of sound a person makes when a long, tiresome job is finally over. The melody was gone from her voice, replaced by a dull, metallic pragmatism. He is Leo's father, Mark. The words were not a confession, they were a clarification of terms. He wasn't a ghost, he was a fact, as solid as the ground she stood on. I was the one who had been the ghost all along, a digital spectre made of wire transfers and video calls. And what am I? The question I had dreaded asking felt pathetic now. I knew the answer. You are a good man, she said, and the way she said good made it sound like useful. You helped us when we needed it. I will always be grateful for what you did for me and Leo. Did. Past tense. The contract was being terminated. All my bricks, my foundation, my kingly feelings, they were just payments. The service had been rendered. The relationship I thought I was building was, for her, just a line of credit that had now been called in. The love, the sweet names, the shared dreams, they weren't a deception, they were the currency of the transaction. Her "I love you" was an invoice. The visa, I said, the memory of fresh humiliation. You didn't want to come here because you were already home. My family is here, she said, her tone unyielding. He is here. It was that simple. I was the foreign investor, he was the local partner. I had provided the capital, but he owned the enterprise. A final, cold piece of the puzzle slid into place. The building fund for the school, how much of that was for him? The silence was her final answer. It was absolute and damning. I looked at the picture on my desktop, the clumsy fake family portrait. I looked at the transfer confirmation page. My entire investment, my entire emotional stake, summarized in one neat number. I didn't say another word. I pressed the red icon on my screen, ending the call. Then I moved my mouse. I didn't click confirm. I clicked cancel. A new message appeared. Your transfer has been cancelled. There was no satisfaction, no anger, just a vast, hollow quiet. The king was dethroned, the fool was enlightened, and in the silent apartment, 8,000 miles away from a life I had only ever been renting, all that was left was the man who had paid for it all. The screen glowed with a sterile, final piece. Your transfer has been cancelled. I sat there, bathed in its light, and waited for the fallout. It didn't take long. My phone buzzed on the desk, a frantic series of vibrations against the wood. I didn't have to look. I could already hear her voice in the text messages, the confusion, the faint concern, then the inevitable, calculated pivot to Leo's needs, the final, desperate lever. I let it buzz. The sound was no longer an emotional trigger. It was just a notification from a service that was now disconnected. Every "I love you, babe" had been a receipt. Every picture of Leo, an update on my investment's performance. Every shared dream was just part of the user agreement I had failed to read. I dragged the clumsy, fake family photo from my desktop into the trash icon and clicked empty. The small animation felt more final than ending the call. I looked around my quiet apartment, the life I actually inhabited. It wasn't much, but it was real. The money I was about to send wasn't just for their rent, it was more than my own. I had been subsidizing a life I wasn't in while neglecting the one I was. I finally understood the game. It wasn't a competition between me and the ghost. He was never a ghost. He was the father, the partner, the man on the ground. He had the title, the history, the physical presence. I had the swift code. He couldn't afford to provide for them, so I did. We were, in a strange, unspoken way, a team. He provided the family, I provided the funding. The trap wasn't that she was a liar. The trap was my own ego, my desperate need to be the king, the hero, the good guy who swoops in and saves the day. She didn't sell me a fantasy, she simply reflected my own back at me, and I paid handsomely for the view. My phone finally went silent. The quiet that filled the room was heavy, but clean. It was the silence of a terminated contract. The king was gone, the provider was retired, the fool had learned his lesson. I had never been building a family, I was just a foreign investor, and my portfolio had finally, mercifully collapsed. The most expensive thing I bought wasn't a woman's affection or a child's future. It was my own delusion.